Okay, hi, I'm Catherine Murphy Gonzalez with Chicago Title.
And I'm Mike Nolan with Chicago Title.
And today we're here to talk about Title 101. So, what is title insurance? So, a title is ownership to the property. Why is it necessary? Because your contract says so. It says in your real estate contract that the seller will deliver clear title. So, a title search is done through it's a standard part of the process. It's conducted by the title company to pull all the information that affects the property. So we go in the public records and we pull all kinds of information to examine the property. The title company and the attorney review the public records to list all the items that impact legal and financial status of the property. And then the insurance, it protects the buyer and the lender against losses incurred due to any title defects that existed prior to the purchase of your home. So this again is prior to you owning it.
So where the title company comes in here in Illinois and in the Chicago area is when the seller's attorney places an order for title commitment with the given title company. We are then going to run a search to see what's in the public record to verify the ownership of the company and to determine if property taxes have been paid or haven't been paid, as well as to see if there are any liens or other encumbrances that affect the property.
And then the seller's attorney will review the search and completes an exam summary, which the title company uses to prepare the commitment. These are different types of deeds. Warranty deed transfers title to the grantee with broad warranties and covenants of title and is the form of deed customarily used. So we usually see this warranty deed on our deals. A quitclaim deed, it transfers title to the grantee without any warranties or covenants of title, and it's usually done in informal transactions or between related parties. Then a trust deed, it will move the property into a land trust. There's other deeds. There's sheriff deeds, there's special warranty deeds, a lot of other deeds. Tax deeds. Good one. Okay.
So there's a couple different ways that people can be vested in the property. Joint tenancy is one where two or more individuals can own the property together, where if one of those parties passes away, the surviving joint tenant would automatically inherit that other person's share. Tenants in common is another way, and if you don't put vesting language on the deed, it defaults to tenants in common. And that is where if each person has a set specified interest in the property, and if that person passes away, rather than that share going to the other owner, it goes to their legal heirs, whoever they may be. Another type, which is similar to joint tenancy, is tenants by entirety, which works basically the same way as joint tenancy, but only married people are able to take tenancy that way.
There's two types of policies. There's a owner's policy, and owner's title insurance is it insures the past. So it doesn't insure the future like normal insurance. When you get your car insurance, you're paying for the next year of insurance. Well, when you pay your one-time fee for your owner's policy, you're insuring everything that happened behind you. So the title company is doing a search we could go back 100 years, and we are insuring each transaction that happened. It insures the past, it's a one-time payment, and it protects your property for as long as you own it. And then the second type of policy is a lender's policy. And the lender's policy, that changes every time your lender changes. So if you refinance the property, then you're going to have a new loan policy, but you never change your owner's policy.
Okay, so now we're going to kind of go through how the title commitment is structured. So the first section of the title commitment is called Schedule A, and that really just lays out the facts of the transaction. So it's going to list the effective date, which is the date that the given county where the property is located has records available for. It's going to show the amount of insurance that is going for both the owner's policy as well as lenders when it applies. It's going to show who is currently vested in title, and it's going to give a legal description of the property. It may include the street address, but the legal description is the most important part, as that is what actually defines the location of the property, and that's what we insure. And then the second part is called Schedule B, and that lists our general requirements to close the transaction and insure it, as well as the exceptions from coverage. So Part 1 shows those requirements, and then Part 2 includes the exceptions from coverage. And those are things that the seller's attorney works with us to clear up so that we can get the commitment showing what we would call clear title, which is what you as the seller need to send to your buyer. And so exceptions from coverage include things like the general exceptions, which cover things like unrecorded leases or liens, covers things like easements or encroachments. And then it's going to list the results of a tax search, and then it's going to show things that are recorded against the property like mortgages, liens, judgments, covenants, conditions, and restrictions. And then other things that may show up would be terms and conditions of a condo association. If there are any court cases that currently the property is affected by, we'll show any pending proceedings. And then any matters that relate to the parties that are involved in the transaction. Okay. Schedule B Part 2 will also show matters that are subordinate to the insured mortgage. So these are things that may be related to the buyers and their ability to obtain financing for the property.
Okay. Oh, so these are some common items that would be found on title, which you kind of just went through, but taxes, you'll see the taxes are always first. We have to pay taxes first, so they will always be showing up first. Then you'll see your mortgage. If there's a second mortgage, that'll show up. Sometimes old mortgages show up, and then we need to get a release for something that may have been paid off 20 years ago. So something like that would show up. We'll usually see sanitary districts on there, taxing districts for schools, any trust documentation, if there's any mechanics liens, HOA information will be on there. They will have, sometimes you need to see the declaration or the assessments, judgment liens on seller's spouse. There's a lot of things. So many times we'll ask you for a personal information affidavit, which goes back 20 years on someone's name that might be common, like my name, Catherine Murphy, is common, and Mike Nolan is common.
Is.
So we would be filling out personal information affidavits just to prove that we're not the guy that's got the judgment against them or something. So they match all that up to where you've come from. Any fence lines, building setbacks, or easements, all of this will show up on title.
So how does title insurance work? Every time property changes hands, there could be mistakes or irregularities that could become problems for future owners down the line. And so title insurance tries to examine that record and identify any issues so that they can be cleared up before the new owner takes title. But if any challenge to the ownership does come down the road, that's an instance where the owner can then file a claim on their title policy to protect their ownership, and also cover them in the result of any kind of loss due to that title defect. And so the title company will come in to either fight any challenges to your ownership in court, or if you are found to, somebody else does have a legitimate interest in the property, you can get a financial compensation for your loss from the title company. So for most of these, you will be covered
if any of this happened prior to you owning the property, then your insurance policy is going to cover this. So they'll cover a deed or a mortgage executed by a person other than the owner, but maybe they have the same name. So this is some fraud that we have seen in the past. And a deed by an LLC or a corporation that is defective because it's not in good standing. So that's another reason that something could happen on your title policy. So again, as we're doing our search and going back, we're actually looking at every transfer, which is the deed transfers it, and we're looking for this kind of stuff. So we want to make sure that that LLC is legitimate and in good standing. A deed or a mortgage procured by fraud, unchecked or unpaid federal tax liens. Those are big. Sometimes they aren't recorded in time when we pull title.
Sure.
And then they show up a month after you're into the house. So an heir or another person presumed dead that appears and suddenly attempts to get the property. So I use an example, grandma died 10 years ago. She left the house to 5 grandkids, and there's always one that you can't find or is holding up the show, so to speak. So they go and, the 4 get together and say, let's just say he's dead because we can't find him. Nobody knows where he is. So they tell the title company, here's the 4 heirs. We don't have a 5th heir. He's gone. And so we close the deal based on their word. And then, 5 years later, here comes that 5th grandson and wants his share of his house. So that would be a definite title claim. So that's why we have to be real careful when we accept a will or we make an exception and there is not a will.
Well, and another thing we're seeing on that note, with the proliferation of DNA testing with sites like 23andMe, for example, more often than before, we are, things like that identify long lost brothers, long lost sisters, and it is possible for heirs to come out of the woodwork because of things like that and make claims on estates.
That is totally true. Okay, you can do this.
So, a will that wasn't properly probated, again, so if there's a will, but a court did not make a determination as to who the heirs were, that's a situation where who is entitled to a property can get murky. Any judgments recorded against the property or also against the person who owned a property, if there's a judgment against an owner, it can attach to the property and a new owner could be liable for it. Any defects from legal proceedings that affected the property, like a foreclosure, disputed boundaries between neighbors, and disputed legal descriptions.
Those are big ones.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then we have judgment liens and revenue liens, which I think we kind of touched on. Recordings that could happen, but after you close. So the seller was upset with the plumber because he was supposed to fix all the bathrooms in the house and he didn't fix it according to the seller. So the seller, canceled his check, stopped payment on the check, and then the plumber filed a lien. And we close and the lien was filed the day before closing. We don't catch that in the public record because, again, public record might have been 2 weeks ago. We're up to 2 weeks ago today. So anything that's been recorded today, 2 weeks ago, we'll see. But if it was recorded yesterday, we won't see. So that could be an issue when all of a sudden mechanic's lien is now under the new buyer's name when it was meant for the old seller. Unpaid or sold property taxes, clerical errors in recording legal documents, and all of the city clearance. The clerical errors is a big one. I think we see a lot of that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, just typos and.
So this delays at closing. There are certain things that can affect properties that if they're not identified early on in the process can cause a delay at closing. So these are things that you want to know about as soon as you can and make the attorneys involved in the transaction aware of so that they can handle them and have them all cleared up ahead of closing. A big one is unprobated estates. So if you're selling property and let's say your seller is, their parents passed away and now they're trying to sell, mom's house. If the property has not gone through probate, we are going to need extra documentation to confirm who the vested owner was and who ultimately has the authority under Illinois law to sell the property. So we're going to need to collect things like a death certificate and an affidavit of heirship, and we may need to charge an additional premium in order for us to insure that property. But it's the kind of thing that you want to make sure is identified very early on so that the attorney involved in the transaction has enough time to clear that up with the title company. Department of Revenue liens. So if someone hasn't been paying their state taxes or federal tax liens, these are things that need to be cleared up ahead of closing and paid off or get work out some kind of agreement with that tax authority to get a release from them. Naked releases. So those are releases that are not associated with a refinance. So if you have a mortgage, this comes up with private mortgages. If you have your client has a mortgage from a family member, let's say, and that family member is just deciding to release the mortgage, essentially gifting them the money, we're going to need some documentation from those parties confirming the nature of the release before we're going to be satisfied that that mortgage is no longer in effect on the property. Unpaid taxes are a major thing that can affect closing. If someone has open taxes, a tax buyer can come out and purchase the rights to the property at a tax sale and effectively take title to that property. And then we also need to make sure that we have the right mortgage date or payoff date on the mortgage, and that the expiration date on the payoff is after closing. Otherwise, we need to get a new payoff in order to pay
Sometimes when they think they're closing July 1st and it didn't close July 1st and the payoff expired July 3rd, so we're going to need a new payoff. And if you reschedule the closing for July 5th, we need a payoff because the payoff's expired. And a lot of times that holds up closing because they don't realize that it expired. But we can never pay that
We have to
off.
account for that new interest that's accrued.
Right. So these are some of the reasons that you need your title company. A few things I wanted to mention with Chicago Title, we do hold earnest money, and we actually have a mobile earnest money. So your clients, we're signing realtors up for their own account with us, and realtors can then all you have to do is enter the seller's name, the buyer's name, the property address, how much earnest money they're going to deposit, and you can literally click submit, and the buyer gets a link to their email, and they can click that link and they can take a picture of the front of the check and the back of the check and submit it to Chicago Title. Then we're holding the earnest money, so it's kind of a very easy way. I also want to mention our master statements. Realtors are not really coming to closing anymore. Ever since COVID, they kind of slowed down from coming, and we want you back. So we want you to come back, and we want you to see the master statement before the closing so that we can help you, because sometimes realtors are like, no, this is wrong. And a lot of times realtors don't realize that you send the attorney the commission statement, but the attorney fills out his own checklist. So he has his own checklist and submits us numbers, but he doesn't give us the exact document that you give him. So a lot of times we don't see that exact same commission statement, and numbers get transposed, all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, you want to make sure we have the right commission on the statement before we close. If we catch any error before we close, it's a lot easier to correct it than post-closing.
Yes.
Kathy, I wanted to ask you, how much are we charging buyers to submit a mobile earnest money deposit?
Nothing. It is no charge.
That's fantastic.
So I know there's been some talk of Earnestly and a couple other
companies out there. Yeah, they typically charge about $7 to $15, to make that deposit.
We are free.
We do it for free.
We do it for free. So thank you for your time. I hope we explained title insurance. Again, it's insuring the past. It's not for the future, but you have it for life. It's a really good one-time payment that secures that you own your home.
Yeah. If you have any questions, about title insurance or closings or any of that, I would encourage you to reach out to Kathy or myself or your local Chicago title rep.
Thank you for your time.
The views and opinions expressed by this presenter are theirs. They may not reflect the views of North Shore Barrington Association of Realtors.